Good afternoon. I am Kelly Phillips. I am the program director here at TechConnects. We're a not-for-profit association currently in our 41st year of operation. As an association, we're focused on being a support community for businesses within the tech industry. TechConnects is the leader in peer-to-peer programming, running a series of peer groups every month with a strong focus on personal, professional, and business growth. Our programs provide an excellent venue for education, knowledge transfer, and an opportunity to connect with peers and potential clients and partners. At less than $1.25 per day, a TechConnects membership is the most affordable way to connect with and learn from other business leaders to help grow your people and your business. Our next Lunch and Learn will be taking place in person, so we're looking forward to some in-person events on Wednesday, April 26th at Y Space in Markham. That is actually on the calendar. And with that session, get ready to buckle up and join us for an exciting discussion about the fast-paced world of the future of mobility and transportations. And our panelists will be from Qualcomm, E&Y, and Six Sensor Group. Then on May 11th, again at Y Space, we're running a seminar on the zombie apocalypse of cybersecurity to help you better understand the zombie threat and then give you practical guidance to build and plan for your business to identify its risks and prepare you to survive. And when it happens to you, hopefully it doesn't, but they're saying about 85% of businesses get hacked again and again. And we're also working on the future of smart cities, which will take place at the end of the May. And then we're fortunate to have Pierre Cleroux, who's BDC's VP of Research and Chief Economist. He'll be talking on June the 8th. We're just working out the details with that one, but Pierre is probably one of the most engaging economic speakers we have ever heard. At this time, I would like to extend a huge thank you to Ernst & Young for being a longtime sponsor of TechConnects and helping put on this session today. Without our great sponsors, we would not be able to run these programs for you. Today on International Women's Day, so happy International Women's Day to all the ladies on the call. We are very fortunate to have two amazing women share their thoughts and insights with you. So we have Jamie Proctor Boyce, she's the Director of Growth at Pocketit, and Sapna Kaushal, who's the Senior Manager at E&Y. They're going to help you learn more about SRED, grants, and business tax incentives, what programs are available, and how to effectively leverage government funding to help you grow your business. Just a couple of quick housekeeping things. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. We will try to get to everything. If we do not, we're going to capture any of the questions, and then maybe we can answer them and send out a little bit of a document. Don't be afraid to kind of come off mute or put your hand up as well. And myself and Jack are going to be monitoring that. With that, I'm going to turn things over to Jamie and Sapna.
Happy International Women's Day. It's a day of commemoration, I think, not for one day, but all year long. And we have some fantastic women around us as we try to build each other up and go from there. But to our audience today, thank you. And some of you might be asking, like, why are we doing this topic? What are we here for? So let me just give you a quick background on what we are doing today. But before that, I'll quickly introduce myself. And we'll go through a quick round of who are you talking to today. So I'm a senior manager at Ernst & Young EY. We have worked with TechConnects for a very, very long time. Personally, my background is in engineering, but over a period of time, I think I've worked with so many companies and I have truly come to admire all that the companies develop, because somewhere along the line, everyone says it's a for-profit business. You're obviously developing a product or service, but the ultimate goal of each development, each particular business is to serve people with some services or products. So that is the reason why we exist, I guess, and we want to support each other in whatever way we can. But I do want to thank you, all of the business owners, because I know it takes a lot to bring a business up, make it up and running. But at the same time, it also helps if you know about all these tax incentives, the grants that are available to fund your business, either upfront or later after the fact. But there is always something for everyone. But my contact information is here. I do lead a lot of client engagements to help them claim the R&D tax credits or digital media tax credits, and working with various provincial and federal agencies. And I've been here for a while, so please ask me any questions that you have. But I will turn to Jamie. Jamie, do you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, folks. My name is Jamie Proctor Boyce, and I'm the Director of Growth at Pocketed. Pocketed is super proud to be collaborating with Ernst & Young for a while now. And we also help entrepreneurs uncover the non-dilutive funding sources that can help them grow their businesses. So Pocketed has both a software solution and a service arm to help you get your grant applications in and get that money in your bank account. I personally, I will totally echo everything that Sapna just said. A through line in my own career really is entrepreneurship. I was an entrepreneur in almost every role I've held. I've worked with entrepreneurs. And so I want to applaud all of your tenacity, your bravery, your resilience in building your businesses. We need innovative solutions. And that is why the government is happy to be investing our tax dollars back into innovation through programs like SRED, which we'll jump into in a minute. But really big kudos to everyone in this room. Obviously our women identifying entrepreneurs today, but really everyone for getting up every day and tackling your business once again. Over to you, Sapna.
Thank you so much, Jamie. And with that, there's a component of tax to all the grants that we receive or all the tax credits that we do. But what we will try to do today is to help you understand what these are, first of all, and then what are the possible scenarios under which you can claim one or another, or maybe both, because the idea is if you can cover the cost that you're going to spend or have spent in developing something, in undertaking an initiative or trying to expand your business, is there something that the government grants or the tax credits can help you with? And the idea today is to just give you a preliminary information. Of course, if you are interested in discussing details from there on, feel free to reach out to us, put it in the chat, raise your hands. We are here to support you with all possible non-dilutive funding topics. Now, often we have heard entrepreneurs coming to us and say, hey, I'm looking to raise some money, but then I really don't want to dilute my business because everyone who would be investing, maybe I have to give away a part of what I own. So these programs help you so that you don't have to dilute the business, but still be able to fund your development growth along the journey, no matter what stage of business you are in. If you have just incorporated, are you along the way a few years, or have you been in business for many, many years? Depending on what you are doing, where you are, there is always something for everyone. But first and foremost, let's dive into the SRED tax incentives. Now, as the name says, it's scientific research and experimental development tax credit. It sounds a bit, I would say, very, very heavy by the name of it. But at the bottom, it's a tax incentive program to encourage businesses in Canada to drive innovation, to create more jobs. Because as companies would receive these tax credits or tax refunds, they can then invest it back in the business. And that's what we all want. The government is looking to see that how businesses can drive this innovation, make Canada like a really innovative hub where people would be happy to create more jobs for such purposes. It's a really good program. It provides more than $3 billion in tax incentives year over year. There's no cap to how much you can claim for SRED. There's no cap to how much the government gives every year. But it is a very, very large federal program. In fact, it's the single largest federal program to support businesses with innovative development. By definition, SRED is the investigation or search in a field of science of technology, which is for the purpose of achieving technological advancement, which ultimately improves any business, material, device, products, or processes. There are federal benefits and provincial benefits. So as long as the company is in Canada, you are incorporated in Canada, whichever province you are in, each province tries to match to the federal tax credit or refund available. Now, if the company is a Canadian corporation, which is private, so CCPC, then you are eligible to claim a better rate, which is almost 35% of your expenditures can be claimed for a tax refund. So this 35% is a cash benefit. It's not a tax credit. So we need to understand that you do not have to be making revenue to be eligible for this program. So you can be pre-revenue, which is totally fine. There is a small understanding which all of us must learn is that you have to file it or submit the SRED claim with the corporate tax return year over year. the absolute deadline to file the SRED claim is 18 months after the tax year end. So let's say if we are running into March end, and the company's tax year end or the fiscal year end was 30th of September 2021, then this is the absolute deadline to claim the work that was done for the year that ended in 30th September 21. But it is so generous, then we advise all the companies to go back and look at a year and a half or 2 years and a half and see what development they have been doing, and then review if those expenditures can be recouped to get some benefit, because you've already spent the money and it doesn't hurt to review whether the activities would be eligible. But SRED is driven by technical development. So the CRA determines the eligibility by looking at the work that you're doing. Now, development can be in any field of science. It can be software development. It can be, I came across a company, they make doors and windows. There is an advancement made in how to make doors and windows. So there is some component of science there. There is often this preconceived notion that, oh, unless and until I am making this, making some huge changes in the technology, or I'm developing a brand new technology, I will not be eligible under this program. But that's not true, because by definition, work must be conducted to advance the knowledge, which means that advancement can be incremental. So you don't have to build a new rocket to go to the moon. The rocket already exists, but as long as maybe you can build that rocket to go a little bit faster, even if it's a second faster than the one that existed previously, it's still an advancement. And the process to achieve that advancement is what the CRA would reward the company for. But they will look at what was the work done, or how did you actually do this work to make that 1 second improvement. So the work must be like a systematic investigation or research, which is carried out in the field of science of technology. And it has to be like experimental in nature, which means the companies are taking a technical risk in trying to make the rocket go 1 second faster, but they don't know if this particular endeavor is going to succeed or not. So success does not define if your project is eligible for SRED. A new technology does not define if your project is eligible for SRED. What defines is that, have you taken technical risk and spent money on developing certain things which are trying to advance the knowledge. This is a very simplistic diagram. Like, as you can see, there is a dotted line. In my mind, I treat it as the base level where all the publicly available knowledge exists, right? For a common person, what is publicly available? Well, anything I can Google or Bing. So if I search about something and I'm able to get an answer, which means you're trying to get up to speed to where things exist, or you're trying to learn. I work with a lot of software companies, so I'll give a software example. So maybe you're trying to learn some techniques that will bring you up to speed, or you were using a really old legacy system and you think it's not going to work, so you must advance it so that it can operate in the present world. In that case, on a very, very basic level, there is low possibility of finding any SRED eligible projects. However, maybe you reviewed everything and the known solutions are not sufficient, which means there is a very good possibility, there's a high potential that now you have to do something to advance and make your system still work. I came across a project, well, the legacy system is based on FoxPro. Now, FoxPro is even old for me, and I've been here for a long, long time. So the system is based on FoxPro. There is no way it can withstand the amount of performance that we are looking for today. There's no way it can withstand the scalability or the reliability of the system. In that case, they need to advance that system so that it can work and it can work well. But then you also need to keep the system up and running. So even though you're trying to bring it up to the publicly available knowledge base, the method by which you're trying to do, is the method known? Is it an easy migration or upgrade? But if it's like so difficult that even if you try to upgrade one component, everything is going to break, there is a high possibility of knowledge advancement being made, because now you're confined by what you have and you have to work within that system, but still make it work. So it's not black and white. And I would always advise everyone to talk to somebody who can actually guide them to see if the project work is eligible or not. Baseline knowledge can become higher if the company has already done something or the company is an industry leader. If I look at my, if I look at some security systems, maybe Cisco is the industry leader and they know a lot of things. Well, I'm developing a security system, but I don't know those things because that information is proprietary. So now again, I'm confined. But if Cisco was doing development, they will not be judged on the publicly available knowledge base. Their knowledge base is obviously higher than the rest of the companies. All that said and done, now we know what is eligible, we know what is not eligible, but how do you scan to see what you're doing? Is it SRED or not? Because companies don't engage in research projects. Companies engage in developing products or services or materials, something that you can sell, right? So this is a small table that we tried to put together just to get you a basic understanding where can R&D that is eligible for SRED lie, right? Like, do you want to look at some product-based criteria? Maybe you are trying to improve a certain product that you're selling, right? But the process of improving that product can be something innovative in nature or trying to push the boundaries of how the product is made. Maybe there is a particular technique of finishing or coating or painting that is very, very unique to the use case that you're addressing. So in those cases, those are good potentials. It can be process-oriented, as we see in a lot of manufacturing companies. A lot of companies are trying to make the machines connected through an IoT network. But in those cases, the hardware has to talk to the software, but it doesn't do that all the time because hardwares can be really, really old. So maybe there is a potential there. Or are you trying to have something unique to the environmental or regulatory bodies because you need to now be at that level where you're required to be? But technically, when you're trying to go to and pass a regulation, it is not possible because you're facing constraints. So there are so many criteria. Some companies will just say, oh, 5 people are going to work on this core R&D project. That's very straightforward, like technical people who are working on core R&D and not on the regular day-to-day development, which is bread and butter business for companies. Cost is a very, very big factor that we often see for R&D because everybody wants to develop, provide efficient products or services, but in lower cost. But lower cost is not easy to maintain, right? Like there is so much thought that goes into making the cost lower that it can drive innovation. So cost itself is not SRED, but cost can drive a SRED project because maybe the cars were really heavier and they want to reduce costs. So now cars are lighter, so they have made the body a little bit lighter, but then that is a lot of innovation because the car still has to run, make sure it's safe, make sure it's efficient and reliable in the environment that it is going to run. So a lot of things, big, small, product, process, cost. Have a look at what you've done in the past year and a half, what you're planning to do going forward, and that's what is going to drive some level of innovation. Maybe it's a very, very small incremental innovation, but we should have a look at it. I'll take a pause here. Are there any questions?
I did see that Jason put a question in there and then Jamie did answer it because he asked, what if the work was outsourced to vendors that you paid? And then thanks, Jamie, because if the subcontractors are based in Canada, their fees could be eligible. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Sapna.
For sure. We are just going to go into those things because so far what we have learned is what is SRED, how the work can be deemed as eligible, non-eligible, maybe eligible. But going forward, what we are going to learn is exactly what is going to answer the question is what expenditures are eligible, right? All technical will drive what the companies can get back, but ultimately the devil is in the details. What is the money that I can get back, right? So these are the types of expenditures that are eligible to be claimed for the R&D work. which is to be done for technical advancements. Salaries for employees who are engaged in such projects, those are eligible costs. Of course, salaries are on T4. Even if you are an owner of the company and you issue yourself a T4, that cost can be claimed for SRED purposes if you're involved in the project. Invoices for Canadian contractors or consultant, that answers Jason's question. So SRED looks at where the work is done. Because this is a Canadian program, the government wants to make sure there is a lot of innovation that is in Canada. They want to make sure that IP lies in Canada. Typically, the cost that you incur in Canada is eligible, right? So if you pay a consultant to do some very specific developer, I'm looking for some deep learning AI type of development, but it's going to be only for 6 months. So I'm going to hire a consultant because it makes sense for me rather than having a person for like all 12 months. So I can pay that person as a contractor, as a consultant, but if that person is in Canada, only then I can claim that expense. If the person is offshore, then unfortunately their cost would not be eligible to claim under the SRED program. You can also have third-party companies, consulting companies to work on your projects, but there is a bit of due diligence that companies must do. And I know it's a very gray area to ask a third party, hey, where are your developers or your people going to sit and work on my project? But CRA does look at that because they want to make sure that the work is performed in Canada. The third type of expenditure that is eligible is, of course, materials, which are incurred during the process of SRED, either consumed or transformed. But we should be mindful usually in software development type of projects, there are no materials, right? We are looking at tangible materials here, like which are used in capital intensive projects like mechanical engineering industry or pharma or biotech. Those type of industries will usually have material that is actually part of the SRED experiment. But then there is a component of overhead, and we'll talk a little bit about it, that can be claimed. So overhead can be calculated in two ways. One is the traditional way, which is, I'm working on a software development project, so which I think is eligible for SRED. I have my computer, my internet, my telephone, my room that I'm working in. I'm having hydro bills. I have AWS cost. I have a lease. All of these are expenses that are overhead, but then what part of these expenses are specifically for the SRED experiment? So it becomes a little bit onerous to define what is the cutoff for that overhead, but it can be done in a traditional sense of calculation. But CRA does allow you to claim a proxy if you have salaried employees, which means you have people who are working on SRED eligible projects. You can just directly take 55% top up on those eligible salaries. So 100K paid to 2 developers for SRED eligible work. The total expenditure will be 155K because I can just do the proxy calculation. I don't have to go through the detailed calculation, which is more time consuming, more difficult to explain if the CRA is auditing, but this 55% is just an election that has to be made. So now we have learned the technical part, what parts are eligible, but of course there are some best practices because everyone who engages in such activities or wants to claim the cost that they have expensed, there is obviously certain things that we must do to make sure we are doing it right? So you don't want to be looking at everything after the year ends, right? Like you want to make sure that you understand the program and you start summarizing it or creating a trail of the work that is performed on an ongoing basis, right? Maybe you implement some real-time documentation, or you can look at it once a month, once a quarter, but start flagging those details, which can be a good potential for SRED. Maybe something like, this is not working. This was such a problem to work on. It's taking me 40 hours instead of the 2 hours. Well, there is something going on there. So that can be flagged. You can create a SRED email address at your company for your company domain. You can CC or BCC emails which are relevant. I feel this is the simplest and best method that can be implemented without any problem because you're just creating an email ID. and just keep forwarding your emails or copy those emails to that email ID. It creates a dump of information that now becomes your backup. Well, a backup has to have a date. It has a date. It has to know who was working on it. There are people who are actually having a conversation in the email. The content of the email is also relevant. So it creates a perfect trail of record keeping that the CRA would always want you to have, right? Then there are ways, because some companies would have a more traditional project management systems like Jira or Asana, and they have epics and stories where you have detailed information of what's going on. There is a start date and end date. So all these are very formal type of documentation. If it's there, it's really good. You can start flagging them. If it's not there, then maybe there is a time that you will implement them. But until then, you can have like a document or a running document in Google and create a dated record every time a change is made. But for very, very large companies, we do have the ability to analyze their backup automatically. Like we have some tools that can help us identify potential areas for SRED. Maybe there are like 20,000 lines on Jira that we need to go through. So we can help partially automate some of the steps and do that analysis for you. Every SRED claim that is submitted to the CRA with the tax return, the CRA can choose to audit or review those claims. So we help you with preparing for those audits and do mock audits on a sample of projects, just so that you're prepared and the risk assessment is done to prepare an audit ready claim rather than doing a claim and then worrying about what if CRA asked me this question. So some of the things that we should all look at on an ongoing basis to make sure we are doing the right thing, we're doing it properly, but not losing sight of the development. That is the key, because the technical work that you do will drive the tax credit. An important part to note here is what is it that you're going to get back? So so for a CCPC, as I said, you are eligible to get a 35% tax refund from the federal program. But if you're in Ontario, you can also get the 8% Ontario Innovation Tax Credit in addition to that. There is a small component of non-refundable tax credit in Ontario. It's called the ORDTC, Ontario Research and Development Program. And the 3.5% credit can be carried forward 20 years, or you can carry it back 3 years. To offset your Ontario taxes. So there is a lot of benefit, irrespective of which province you are located in. But the maximum benefit is for companies who are Canadian-controlled private corporations and are under certain thresholds. So we can review that for you. Essentially, how it turns out, maybe to say, for each dollar spent, you can get about 67 cents back if you qualify under all the criteria and you're eligible. You can actually get a lot of it back. So 67 cents on a dollar for labor expenses, because you are going to add that proxy. I think it's a really lucrative program, and which will help you drive innovation year over year. I just wanted to do a small pitch on. So we have developed this SRED tracking or a collaborative platform, because often we hear from companies, hey, I've done a lot of work, but I don't know what to do with it. How can I just give you all the information? It's too much for me to go through and tell you the innovative parts. Well, the solution is here, because this particular powerful system backed by machine learning and AI, artificial intelligence, can not only allow you to see what is happening. As you can see the claim summary, you can see the expenditures. So there is a dashboard component to it, but there are modules which will allow you to have that project tracking on an ongoing basis. There can be intelligent project analytics performed on the back end, and it all helps to prepare an audit-ready intelligent SRED claim for you. And that is all about SRED. So any questions about SRED that I can answer at this time? All right, I will pass it on to Jamie for the government funding part.
Thanks, Sapna. Yeah, just to reiterate, SRED is really powerful, folks. So if you are innovating, we like to say here at Pocketed, we often share the stat that there's $5.9 billion in government funding available to businesses every year. Half of that comes from SRED. So a super important program to have on your radar. That being said, government funding isn't just for technology companies. It can be for brick and mortar stores. It can be for service companies. It can be for consumer packaged goods, professional services. All types of industries are eligible for government funding for your business. So even if SRED's not a fit, don't count yourself out of the incentives game. There is likely money that is out there for you, and that folks like EY or Pocketed can help you position your projects. We'll get to that in just a second, because grants don't really fund businesses, they fund projects. And we're always happy to help you position activities to best leverage these types of programs. So there are a couple different key categories of funding available. Sapna's already shared the largest program in the R&D funding space, but we've also got money for market expansion, money for training, money for hiring, capital expenditures. There's money out there to be greening your business. If you don't necessarily need to be a sustainability business, but if you're doing something that drives sustainability through your projects, there might be funding for you. So lots of different categories to consider. So Sapna sort of already covered this, but I think here we are at the midpoint of our session. It's probably good to repeat this. Why do we care so much about non-dilutive funding? Well, it's powerful in that it doesn't mean you have to give away ownership of what you've built in order to get money. So when you are using non-dilutive sources, again, that word means they're not going to dilute your stake in your business. So whereas when you're taking on investment capital, you often are giving away ownership stakes, shares in your business to your investors. Now, that's a great strategy that's really important and powerful when the time is right for your business. But non-dilutive sources like loans and grants and tax incentives, again, can help you retain all of that ownership of what you're building and give you a ton of flexibility to pursue the projects that are most important to you. So we're going to dive in before we chat. We can chat later on about some specific programs, but I mentioned that we'll talk about some tips. The first one I've sort of already given away. So we're going to share these top 3 tips here that we'd love to make sure everyone is aware of when it comes to grants, being that grants fund projects. Grants are unfortunately not an on-demand funding solution, but that shouldn't intimidate you. And especially today on International Women's Day, we want to make sure that folks know to go after all the money, not just the money that is maybe explicitly for their industry or their identity criteria. So we'll chat about each of these in a little bit more detail. So the first is grants fund projects. So again, I'm going to say it again, and maybe I'll stay on that slide just for a minute, Sapna. We definitely hear folks all the time saying, you know, I'm not a technology business, or I'm not doing digitization. Why would I qualify for these programs? Well, really, when we think about government funding, it's a beautiful partnership, right, between this private sector business that you're building and our public sector funding. And so really, at the end of the day, yes, the government does care about your business, but they don't really care about what you are. They care about what you're doing. They care about the projects that you are executing to both meet your business aims and the mandates of government. So for example, there is so much money out there for hiring. I think probably the number one request that I get from my consulting clients is, I need money for marketing. And the hard news is that there's not a ton of programs that's just going to give you unrestricted funding to market your business. But there are literally hundreds of programs and millions, if not billions of dollars out there to hire a marketer, right? If you need marketing and you're willing to create a job, then that would be the project. The project is that you're creating a job for a young person, a student, someone re-entering the workforce, someone located rurally, an Indigenous person. All of these folks that maybe are facing barriers to employment, if you're willing to help the government with their project, which is making sure all folks have access to meaningful work by creating a job that maybe is marketing, they're happy to invest marketing money into your business. So again, it's really important to think about not just what your long-term high-level goal is in your business, but what are the projects? How can you break down that goal into projects And then with that lens, be investigating different government funding and see how you can fit that project into the funder's mandate. So I'm happy to take a quick pause there in case there are any questions. But don't worry, if not, I've got another tip.
Sorry, Jamie, I was going to maybe ask
please.
a question on that, because I think that's a great tip. And I like how you spun that. You know, somebody's thinking, oh, I need money for marketing, but it's, if you think of it in a different light, that you can hire somebody to do your marketing. In terms of those types of grants, can you give kind of a rough ballpark of what would be covered, how much is covered? If there's,
Absolutely.
Are there specific ones to go after?
Yeah. And maybe I'll pause on that, Kelly. I promise I'll get to it, but I do have a slide that gives some specific program examples. So that'll probably help cement it in
perfect.
folks' heads. But I do think, just to go from that point, again, we really have to remember that this is government money. So in terms of planning ahead, you know, everybody wants grants to be like a money spout. We're going to turn on the faucet and dollars are going to flow out. But the reality is, you definitely need to plan ahead. Sometimes we can see folks getting money in their bank in 90 days with like a student hiring grant, but the reality is, for most programs, it's going to be 4, 6, 8 months before you see the money in your bank account. And so definitely cash flow is something to be mindful of when pursuing grants. Happy to chat about that further. But really, at Pocketed, we talk about how there are 3 stages to sort of your incentives journey. You have to identify your opportunities. Pocketed software is really helpful for that, so we'll come back to that as well. Then you need to strategically decide. So each of you in the room likely are eligible for somewhere between 100 to 300 government grant programs. But in a single year, if I was your grant consultant, I'd be advising you to figure out the top 5 that you're going to go after. So there really is a middle stage of figuring out your strategy. And then the final stage, execution. That's the grant writing. So it's very, very important to not skip that middle stage. It can be really overwhelming to find all of the opportunities that you're eligible for in that identification stage. So again, it's critical to hone in on what matters for your business and what are the top programs you're going to pursue to fund them. Now, again, the connection I'm trying to make between tip 1 and tip 2 is that this is government money. And so these projects do have to be a dovetail between what you need to execute and what the government is caring about. But right now, that's great. Things like creating jobs, a big government priority, also matter to business. Digitizing our economy, greening our economy, keeping our economy innovative. These are all things that you guys are likely doing, and the government is excited to fund. And so then our last tip is just remember to go after all the money. And again, this is just another way to remind you to think creatively about your projects. Sure, you might self-identify as a BIPOC female entrepreneur, and there's definitely money out there for you. But the reality is, like, maybe 3% of government programs are specifically earmarked for women. So it's really important, just like we don't want the world to pigeonhole us, it's really important to not pigeonhole ourselves. And so again, go after all the money. Sure, go after that BIPOC funding, go after that funding for Indigenous entrepreneurs, but don't forget to go after money in wider categories, because there's going to be a lot more out there for you. So yeah, please go ahead.
No, I just wanted to reiterate, I think it's a really great point, because there are so many programs that are available. I think at any given time, so much is available, but what is it that you really want, and what is it that really fits your need at that time is super important, right? Maybe this year you're going to focus only on market expansion because you have done the innovative work, you've got what you have. So market expansion becomes a project, and then you need to look at market expansion type of grants that might be available for you, irrespective of what industry you are in. So really great point. Thank you.
Thanks, Sapna. Yeah. So again, Pocketed is a great solution to support with your identification and your strategy and your execution. So we have built a software platform. We believe we have Canada's most comprehensive and up-to-date grants database. We both have proprietary algorithms that help us capture embedded information about grants, but we also have a full-time human team that's keeping every entry in the database up to date. And so because of this, we can save you weeks, if not months, in research on Google. The platform with even just with a free trial will intelligently connect you with the programs that your business might be eligible for. We also offer consulting services to help you figure out the strategy. And then we also have a whole marketplace of grant writers if you're looking for somebody to help you write a grant, particularly like a larger scale, more lucrative opportunity. You can use Pocketed for all stages of the journey, or you can just pick and choose. It's quite modular and designed to meet entrepreneurs wherever they're at. That being said, when you're looking for SRED support, that's not something we do. That's something that we would introduce you to EY for. So next up, I think I kind of already did this. You sign up for a Pocketed account, you get your grant match, your grant list automatically. We either have software tools or consulting to help you write applications. And hopefully then we're getting money in your bank. I'm just trying to look here. I do have I'll put it in the chat before we leave, but we do have a code for everyone. If you'd like to try Pocketed, you can always do a free 14-day trial, but we also have a 40% off coupon for our software plans. So we'll make sure that's in the chat before we leave. So here's what you were asking about, Kelly. We're finding that people really like to sort of see themselves and see their grant journey. And I think that might even apply to Jason's question. Well, maybe not exactly, Jason. I will come back to that, how much you're going to pay for all of these services. So I know quite a few folks that register for the session are pre-revenue. That's okay. There's not as many grants available for you, but there's absolutely some. So if you're small, maybe you're bootstrapped, maybe you have a small angel investment, probably your funding priorities are going to be hiring, research and development, marketing, maybe some other things. So here are some programs that would be relevant to you. On the hiring side, hiring is absolutely the on-ramp to funding. You don't even have to be incorporated for some hiring programs. You do not need to be profitable or even incurring revenue for many of these programs, but you do need to create meaningful employment. And so that can be done through programs with MyTax. That's often when there's a post-secondary partner involved. It can be done with the Student Work Placement Program. That's one of the most popular. There's money 3 times a year to hire post-secondary students, regardless of their age. So it could be a more mature student, even someone getting a master's or PhD. And the government will subsidize 50 to 70% of that student's wages every 4 months. And sometimes you can even get consecutive terms for the same student. So that's a 50 to 70% subsidy, Kelly. $5,000 to $7,000. There's also something, the third bullet is digital skills for youth. That's 100% subsidy to hire a young person aged 30 or younger in a role for, and that 100% subsidy usually covers 26 weeks. It's a super popular program. 100% isn't bad, but it has been closed for about the last year. We do believe it will reopen in May or June of this year. Again, that's another plug for Pocketed. There are literally thousands of programs in our grants database. It's hard to keep on top of all of these deadlines and these opportunities. That's what the software does. It sets alerts. Our team also has like a very robust marketing function where we're making sure our users get the first notice of these programs. We also have a plan that I lead called Concierge when you really want like one-to-one grant support. And I'm going to make sure personally that you're hearing about these programs either before or on the day they open. So lots of other programs in hiring. Happy to chat about those further. But there is stacking. So as Sapna was mentioning with SRED, you can leverage the federal SRED tax credit for innovation, as well as the Ontario-based tax credit for innovation. Same with hiring grants. There's a student hiring tax credit that you can stack with the federal student wage subsidy. So research and development is another key area. Can chat about IRAP. I saw that question as well in just a second. But then there's tons of other categories. There's marketing. That CDAP is a really nice, it's the Canadian Digital Adoption Program. There's a couple different streams, but it'll give you $2,400 even if you're a very early stage company for digital costs. Another strategy we see pre-seed companies tackling a lot are getting connected to incubators and accelerators. Those can be very powerful, both for funding and mentorship, as well as corporate competitions. Or different tech ecosystem awards. Things like the Desjardins Good Spark grant is a corporate competition. The BMO Startup Entrepreneurial Women won. Visa did one. MasterCard did one. We see these are great strategies, particularly if you have a compelling story and good photographs. You can throw your hat into the ring for these competitions. They're nice because they tend to give you unrestricted funds, 10,000, 25,000, really to do whatever you want with in your business. So that's an example of the pre-seed company. We can go quickly through the Series A company. I do think the main things that are the same would be hiring. That's that next slide. But then you're definitely going to have way more opportunities in the R&D space. So we've already talked about SRED. You know, you don't need to be profitable to claim that SRED, right? But with many of the larger scale grant programs in the R&D space, they do require matching funds. So for example, Scale AI has a bunch of programs that they focus on AI and logistics. And they have some great programs, but they largely do ask that the company provide 50% of the project costs. They'll give you $1 million, but they want you to have a requisite $1 million to match for a program. Now, it's not always $1 million. Sometimes it's 25K, sometimes it's 100K. But as you grow, your funding opportunities are going to be able to grow because you're going to be able to financially enter into partnership with these funding agents. And then a couple other things that expand, obviously the training grant, honestly, that one could have been on the pre-seed slide as well. Do note that in Ontario, you can get $10,000 every year to reimburse you for training costs for your employees, or even folks that you intend to employ. So there's definitely money out there if you need to upskill your staff and keep Canadian workers competitive. Market expansion, you can do that with MyTax. CanExport is open now. So if any folks in the room have declared at least $100,000 in revenue via the CRA in the last year, you're eligible for the CanExport SMEs program. That is literally to travel into new markets. So if you want your plane ticket, your trade show attendance, a per diem, hotels, et cetera, covered, because you're ready to start promoting your services or your products, it can be either, in a new market, CanExport is a great one to explore. All of these grants are ones that Pocketed can write with you, sometimes only on success. So you'll only pay for grant writing fees if we successfully give you the money. For some of the more competitive programs, we do a hybrid fee, something upfront and something on success. And then there's also capital expenditures. So there are large scale grants. There's also tax credits that EY folks can help you with in that category as well. So I'll pause there. If there's any specific questions, and maybe I will address, or maybe Sapna, there was a question about how SRED works with IRAP. Definitely jump in, Sapna, but my understanding is that SRED is only going to reimburse you for what you've spent that wasn't already subsidized. So as a rule, you can't double dip. As a rule, you can't profit.
That's the baseline of everything, right, Jamie? Like you just cannot double dip on the same pool of money, right? So if you have received money to do like a research project and you're using it to pay the salaries for those individuals, you can't double dip on that particular grant, which means you cannot calculate SRED on the same money. However, there is always a sweet spot, and I always say this, and that's why planning is important, because there is something for everything. If you receive IRAP does not fund you 100%. It will typically fund like 70% or 80% of the development. And so there is the remaining 30% you still have to incur. So that is cost that you can get, that is the cost that you can claim under the SRED program. Sometimes there are ways to cater and prepare applications that you're not actually combining the two streams for the same project, because SRED is very, very focused or heavily focused on the technological advancements or knowledge advancements being made. IRAP is a technical grant, but it doesn't focus on the advancement. And there are some marketing or some costs that you can claim under IRAP that is not eligible for SRED. So maybe you divide your project development into two streams to say this is base R&D, it's still technical development, but then you're facing problems, but then there is like the core R&D, which is, you know that this is going to be eligible for SRED. So the two streams can move parallel, and then everything else can be covered by a market expansion type of grants or hiring grants. So there is a lot of it, but the simple formula is if you receive money to pay salaries or other expenditures to do technical development that you want to claim for SRED, we have to back it out, unfortunately. But I think that's like a generic thing that you would see across programs.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I can quickly cruise through this last couple of slides. And honestly, Sapna, just for time, if you want to just pull up the slide that has all 5 tips on it, because I do want to leave some time for questions. But really, these are some ideas if you're going to pursue grant writing on your own. So that is absolutely something that you can do. Things like student hiring grants are relatively easy to execute. There are many programs where you don't necessarily need a grant writer. Though that being said, Pocketed also always offers grant review services. So if you want to take a pass on your application, you pay us $150 an hour to review your app. And I'd say that applications, even large scale ones, don't usually take more than 3 hours, can be as little as a half an hour. So that's a cost-effective way to get a professional advice. But really what these tips are urging you to do, 1, 2, and 3 are almost all the same tip, folks, which is make sure you understand what the funder cares about. This is where sometimes consulting might help. Maybe you are going to write your own grant applications, but you want to sit down with someone like me or Sapna for just a one-off consultation to make sure you really understand the mandates of the funders. So one is tailor your application to what the funder cares about, focus on your project and why it matters to what the funder cares about, and then use language that you're seeing in the funder's website. Make sure that's included in your application. For example, these federal student hiring grants that give you 50 to 70% on interns every 4 months. There's one large federal fund, but there are, no joke, 22 different delivery agents. And some of them care that you're giving the student a digitally immersive role. Some care that you're exposing them to entrepreneurship. Some care that you're introducing them to the hospitality industry. So it's really important to make sure that you might have the same student and the same job for all 3 of those delivery agents, but you're going to focus on how you're an entrepreneur and you're giving the student a front row seat to entrepreneurship, wearing many hats that it takes to build a business if you're pursuing the funder who cares about entrepreneurship. Lastly, second to lastly, building relationships with funders is important. I always worry that I frustrate my clients when I tell them about these great programs and then I say, and actually your next step is to pick up the phone and get to know that funder yourself. Everybody wants to be a part of your success. All of these government funders, consultants like Sapna and myself, we want to see you succeed. And usually that does start with building a relationship with these different funders. So IRAP is a great example. Really, you can't really apply to IRAP until you've developed your relationship with your ITA. So we're always happy to give you tips on how to make sure you can pique an ITA's interest in your project, but you really do need to do that relationship building on your own. And then again, we can't say it enough, plan ahead, start early. There are thousands of programs. I've worked in the grant space for a long time now. I still get overwhelmed on the daily. And so it helps to have a partner listening to you, helping you map out what your priorities are, and then how do we maximize the amount of funding that we can get to drive those projects. So I'll stop there. I'll just put it in the chat really quickly. This is the link to create a Pocketed account, and that Tech Connects March 40 will get you 40% off of our software subscriptions. If you want to flip us an email, I can also manually get you 10% off a grant consultation or that concierge service. So I'll put the email in the chat as well. In terms of grant writing fees, happy to share those as well. But again, it can be anything from $150 for a consultation to, I would say industry standard on success is around 20% of an award fee, but we see it be lower at Pocketed regularly. All to say it's very much based on how ready your business is for a grant and how competitive the fund is for the exact fees. But for the most part, whenever possible, both SRED and grant writing is done on success. So we are sharing in that risk with you.
Okay, does anybody have any questions that did not get answered that you're all of a sudden thinking through? I know it's a little overwhelming, and the grants are constantly changing too, correct?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean,
can never say that enough. I think the grants open and they close and then a new one comes. Like, it's a very, very dynamic landscape, right, Jamie?
Absolutely. And that's why we built Pocketed. That's why there's a whole industry around SRED support, because this is it's hard, particularly when you're building your business, to have an in-house person that's an expert accountant or an expert, development person and knows all about grants. And so these are fractional services that Pocketed and EY can support you with. And so for, a small investment, you can have somebody keeping an eye on all of these opportunities for you.
And if you're not able to ask the question right now, maybe like you want to take the information, it is a lot of information. It can be overwhelming for anyone. So if you want to have like a one-on-one consultation, we're happy to do that. Just reach out, raise your hand, and we'll set up those meetings just to understand what you do, what your business is. And the idea is to support you with the growth and development you're looking for in your business in the future years. And I always say that I'm like, if I had set up a business like 20 years ago, I think it would have been great but at that time, I wasn't aware of any of these things. I think the way I grew up was like, okay, you study and you get into a job. So entrepreneurship, I really love all the entrepreneurs, how much time and effort, and like it takes a lot to get up and work for yourself, more so than it takes to work for an employer. But please do take advantage of everything that's available out there for you. It is out there. You just need to skim through it and make sure you are focused enough to see what is the need versus what is the fit, and then go for it.
I know that kind of working through grants, writing grants, looking for grants is almost a full-time job. So I know these services are things that do help. And as you said, there is a lot of money available. When you said that there was actually $5.9 billion in government funding, I was surprised. And there's probably a lot that's left on the table from year to year because people just don't know to access it and to go access it. And I do like how you said, don't kind of pigeonhole yourself. Make sure you look at other things. I think sometimes too, the worst thing somebody can say to you is no. So sometimes just go for it, even if you don't think of it. And I think one of the other big tips here, as you talked about the SRED, is always just documenting everything right from the beginning, regardless of whether you think, okay, this is going to qualify. Because if you start from the beginning, have things documented, and then you have that opportunity to go back. It's much easier to do that than it is to try to say, okay, well, in 2021, this is what I did. So you've got a list of it. Yeah, keep yourself a diary and a journal, right? And then it helps things to go along. Okay, does anybody have any questions at all, or you're just too overwhelmed? Okay, excellent. Well, thank you very much, Sapna and Jamie, for running through all of these tips and things to think about. Thank you to E&Y for helping put this together. We do look forward to seeing you at our next sessions that will actually be in person. So that'll be nice. It'll be an opportunity to network, and you have to be in the Markham area or want to travel to this area or kind of around here to join us. I know it's a little bit harder. So we would love to see you at some of these sessions. If you're interested in attending a peer group and you have not, please reach out to myself or even Ryan. We would love to have you there. And we did record the session, so we will put it up just kind of for your reference again. Once again, Jamie and Sapna, thank you very much for taking the time. Happy International Women's Day. And we were honored to have some fantastic and smart ladies here to share their insights with us.